The wind came down from the mountains like a living thing that night, tearing at the roof of Eli Mercer's cabin with icy claws. Inside, the old cowboy sat close to the iron stove, patching a torn bridle with steady hands while black coffee bubbled on the fire. Outside, the storm howled through the Wyoming Valley like the fury of winter itself. After 35 years on this land, Eli had learned there was no arguing with the weather. You endured it, or it buried you. The first knock was faint. He thought it was a branch blown loose. The second was sharper, desperate. No one traveled in a blizzard unless death was chasing them. He laid aside the leather, took his Winchester from its pegs, and went to the door. "Who's there?" A woman's voice came back, thin and trembling through the roar of wind. When Eli pulled open the door, the storm tried to rip it from his hands. A figure stood there, half buried in snow, dark blue dress, frozen stiff, hair crusted with ice. She clutched a carpet bag like it held her last hope. Eli didn't ask questions. Questions could wait until a person was alive enough to answer them. He grabbed her arm, thin even through the frozen wool, and pulled her inside, fighting the door shut behind them. She shook so hard her teeth clattered. Her lips had gone past blue. He turned his back, pulled a spare flannel shirt from a peg and held it out. "Change. Wet clothes will kill you faster than a bullet." He heard the carpet bag drop, buttons struggling, fabric rustling. He kept his eyes on the stove, feeding wood until it roared. When he turned back, she stood wrapped in his shirt to her knees, her frozen dress in a heap at her feet. "Blanket," he said, handing her the thick wool from his bed. She took it with hands that could barely close. He guided her to the chair nearest the stove and poured coffee. Her fingers shook, but she managed to sip. Color crept slowly into her cheeks. Bean soup followed, thick with salt pork and the last of the winter vegetables. She ate like someone who'd forgotten what food was, slow at first, then steady. Only when she finished did Eli ask, "Why are you out in this storm?" Quote. She lifted her eyes, green as sagebrush in summer. "Owen Blackledge brought me from Boston to be his wife. Changed his mind at the crossroads. Said I wasn't fit for ranch life. Left me there with a ticket home and nothing else." Eli knew Owen Blackledge, biggest rancher in the valley, rich and proud as a peacock. Also knew the crossroads, 3 miles away, buried under snow. "You walked from there?" She nodded. "Coach can't run till the weather clears. Hotel wanted payment in advance. The fare wouldn't cover food and a room both." She didn't cry, didn't beg, just told the facts, calm as if reading a ledger. Eli respected that. "Mail-order bride," he said quietly. "Was," she answered. "Now I'm a woman who sold everything for a promise that wasn't kept." The wind screamed around the cabin, shaking the walls. Eli added another log to the stove. "You can stay till the weather breaks. Name's Eli Mercer." "Margaret Doyle," she said softly. "Maggie." Quote. She looked around the small one-room cabin. Tools hung neat on the walls, rifle above the door, bed in the corner, everything in its place. "I can work for my keep. Cook, mend, clean." "Storm like this," he said. "Christian things giving shelter." Her mouth twisted. "Mr. Blackledge goes to church every Sunday, I'm told." Eli didn't answer. Owen's faith wasn't his concern. He pointed to the bed. "You take it. I'll sleep by the stove." "I couldn't." "You could and you will. I've slept on worse ground than this." She stood straight, despite her exhaustion. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer." "Eli," he corrected. "We're not formal here." He busied himself banking the fire and locking the door against the wind. When he finally rolled up in his buffalo robe beside the stove, he could hear her breathing, shaky but steady. The storm battered the cabin, trying to find weakness, but the place held. In the dark, she whispered, "You didn't ask why he really sent me away." Eli watched the firelight flicker on the stove door. Man like Owen doesn't do anything without profit in mind. Pretty woman from Boston shows up, and he sends her off in a blizzard. That's not about you being unsuitable. That's about something else. Silence filled the room. Then her voice, almost too quiet to hear. "You think I'm pretty?" "Think you're alive," he said. "In a storm like this, that's what matters." A sound came from her, half laugh, half sob. He didn't look back. Some feelings needed privacy. By dawn, the wind eased, though snow still fell thick as wool. Eli rose quietly. rebuilt the fire, and started coffee and biscuits. Maggie woke to the smell, sitting up in his bed under his mother's old quilt. "Storm's breaking," he said, "but roads will be closed for days." "I should try to. You should eat breakfast and stop talking foolish." She came to the table barefoot, his flannel shirt hanging loose under the quilt. Her hair, now dry, was chestnut streaked with copper. They ate biscuits and gravy in silence. Good food for a cold morning. When she rose to wash the dishes, she said, "I meant what I said about working. I won't take charity." "Everybody works here," he said. "That's just living." Through the frost-etched window, the world was buried white, the barn a dark smudge against the drifts. They were cut off from everything. Might as well have been the only two souls left alive. As she wiped the table, he watched her careful movements, the steady set of her spine, the quiet dignity that hadn't frozen out of her. Whatever Owen Blackledge had rejected, it wasn't weakness. The snow still fell, soft and patient, covering the sharp edges of the world. And Eli Mercer, a man who'd thought he was done with surprises, realized his life had just taken a turn he couldn't yet name. The wind still whispered around the cabin, but the worst of winter's rage had passed. For 3 days, Eli and Maggie lived inside that small world of firelight and snow, each quietly testing the edges of the other's presence. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was steady, the kind that comes when two people know talking too much might break something fragile and good. On the morning of the 3rd day, Maggie spread letters across the pine table. Their paper looked too fine for a ranch cabin, edges trimmed neat, the writing careful and rich with false promises. "He wrote these for 2 months," she said. "Talked about respect, partnership, the blessings of marriage." Her voice stayed calm, but her hands trembled. "He made it sound like a dream worth crossing the world for." Eli picked one up. Owen Blackledge's handwriting marched bold across the page. Flowery talk of shared futures, of needing a wife who could help with the books, of love that sounded bought and sold. Then came the last paper, newer than the rest, signed with a heavy slash of ink. "Agreement terminated due to unsuitability." Eli read the words slow, tasting their cruelty. "Unsuitable," he muttered. "Man's got more pride than sense. A woman like you could make any home better." Maggie folded the letter flat. He didn't see a woman. He saw a transaction that no longer profited him. "Then he's a fool twice over." She gave a bitter smile. "You think this was about me? It was about land. About deals. I was just paperwork." "Maybe," Eli said, "but that paper might matter yet. Keep it safe. A man who lies for profit leaves trails in ink." That afternoon, the snow eased enough for light to filter through the window. Maggie stood by it, hair loose, cheeks flushed from warmth and food. "You're staring," she said without turning. "Just making sure you're real." She looked back at him with the ghost of a laugh. "Real enough to make bread if you've got flour." He grinned. "Got flour?" "No starter." "Then I'll make one. Give me a few days." She went to work like she'd always belonged there, measuring, mixing, tending to the stove. When her hands brushed his reaching for the poker, both froze. The fire popped, and she smiled faintly. "Too much or too little heat ruins everything," she said. "Same goes for life," Eli replied. That night, the cold returned hard. Nails popped in the walls. Wind sneaked through every seam. Eli fed the fire, but it wasn't enough. Maggie's teeth chattered under the quilt. "This is foolish," she whispered. "You take your bed back. I'll sit by the stove." "You'll freeze before morning." Quote, "So will you." He hesitated, then made a choice that would have scandalized the nearest town. He carried his buffalo robe to the bed and sat on top of the quilt. "Body heat's better than pride right now," he said. For a moment she didn't move. Then softly, "All right." They sat side by side, wrapped in layers of wool and silence. He felt her shaking slow, her breathing even out. When she leaned against his shoulder, it wasn't romance. It was survival. But something shifted in that dark cabin. something neither could name. Near dawn she dozed, head on his arm. He stayed still, watching the pale light creep across the floorboards, listening to her quiet breaths. When she woke, she moved away gently. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For being kind when you didn't have to be." He poured coffee. Kindness don't cost a man anything, and it tends to pay back double. They didn't talk about what had happened. They didn't have to. The distance between them had changed. Smaller now, warmer. Days turned into a rhythm. Morning chores, mending, small talk about cattle and weather. Maggie found purpose in work. Eli found calm in her presence. She sewed his torn shirts, cooked real meals instead of trail food, read aloud from his mother's old Bible at night. One evening, as she washed up behind a blanket hung for privacy, her voice drifted out soft and sure. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters." "Lot of cowboys found religion on the trail," Eli said, "usually after a stampede or lightning storm." "Did you?" "Found something. Maybe not the kind you find in church. But you see a calf born alive in a blizzard or the first grass after drought. You start thinking there's something bigger out there. My father would call that foolish." "Your father never watched the Platte River at dawn." When she stepped out from behind the blanket, her hair hung loose, damp and shining like new copper. He kept his eyes on the fire, but his pulse betrayed him. She smiled faintly. "I think I like your kind of faith better, Mr. Mercer." That night, the wind dropped to a whisper. They slept separately, but the cabin felt smaller somehow, less lonely, more alive. By morning, sunlight poured through cracks in the shutters. Eli opened the door to a world reborn, snow glittering under a sky so blue it hurt the eyes. The storm had passed, but peace doesn't last long on the frontier. He saw riders in the distance, dark shapes against the white hills, moving slow but sure toward the cabin. Trouble didn't need an introduction in Sweetwater Valley. Eli knew the lead horse, knew the man riding it, Owen Blackledge. He turned to Maggie. "Go inside, don't argue." Her face paled, but she obeyed. Eli stepped out onto the porch, rifle within reach but not raised. Owen reined in, smug even in the cold. "Heard you been harboring stolen property, Mercer." "Nothing stolen on my land except the peace you're disturbing." The sheriff was with him, Amos Hale, decent man caught between duty and politics. Owen smirked. "My mail-order bride's gone missing. Folks say she's holed up here." Eli's voice stayed calm. "Woman came to my door half dead in a storm. Christian thing was to give shelter." The cabin door opened. Maggie stepped out, chin high, wrapped in Eli's blanket like a queen in homespun. "I am not property, Mr. Blackledge. You left me to die in that storm. You signed away every claim to me." She held out the paper. The sheriff took it, read slow, then looked at Owen. "Says here, you ended the agreement yourself." "She tricked me," Owen barked. "Lied about her intentions." Maggie's voice cut sharp through the cold air. "My only intention was to survive. You changed your mind." "That's all." Eli stepped forward, eyes level with Owen's. "She stays here by choice. Any man says otherwise can answer to me." Owen's hand twitched toward his gun belt. Eli's hand twitched toward his rifle. The sheriff broke the moment with a stern voice. "That's enough. She's free to stay or go. This is done." Owen glared, red-faced, but turned his horse. "This ain't over, Mercer." As they rode off, Maggie's strength finally cracked. She sank into the porch chair, shaking. "He'll make trouble." Eli poured her coffee, steady as ever. "Let him. Man like that can't win against truth, not forever." Inside the cabin, the fire still burned, warm and sure against the storm outside and the storm yet to come. The days that followed were quiet, but that kind of quiet that comes before a storm of a different kind. The snow melted fast under a warming sun, and the valley began to breathe again. Birds returned to the pines, and water ran loud in the creek. Yet inside Eli's chest, something stayed tense. He knew Owen Blackledge wasn't a man to walk away beaten. He was right. By the third morning, Eli found his north fence cut and one of his hens dead on the porch, a warning clear as any written note. He buried the bird in silence, saw Maggie watching from the window, her face calm but pale. When he came inside, she met his eyes steady. "Teach me to shoot," she said. He studied her for a long moment. "You sure?" Quote, "I've spent too much of my life depending on others to save me. If I'm staying here, I want to know how to defend myself too." Quote. So he handed her his Winchester and spent the afternoon behind the cabin teaching her how to aim. Her hands trembled at first, but she learned quick. Steady breath, light squeeze, follow through. By sunset, she hit the target clean 3 times in a row. "Not bad for a Boston schoolteacher," he said. "Not bad for anyone," she replied, eyes shining. That evening, young Tommy Bright, the same ranch hand who'd ridden with Owen, came galloping up. "Sheriff sent me," he said, hat in hand. "Owen's been spreading talk in town. Says Eli Mercer shacked up with his runaway bride. Says you're living in sin." Maggie didn't flinch. "And what does the sheriff say?" "He says talk's talk, but he can't stop gossip. Reverend Coles asked if you'll both come to church Sunday. Folks need to hear your side." Eli and Maggie exchanged a look. He saw the worry in her eyes, but beneath it, something else, resolve. "We'll come," she said. "If I've been judged in whispers, I'll speak where everyone can hear me." That Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. The church at Sweetwater was packed. Ranchers, wives, farm hands, half the town come to see the show. Owen sat in the front pew, smug and smiling like a man sure of his power. After the sermon, Reverend Cole cleared his throat. "Miss Doyle has asked to speak." Eli stood beside her as she walked to the front. Her voice carried clear and calm across the hushed room. "I came to Wyoming Territory to marry a man who promised me honesty and home. Instead, he left me to die in a storm. If it weren't for Mr. Mercer, I wouldn't be standing here today. He offered me shelter, not sin, respect, not ownership." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maggie lifted the paper Owen had signed, her hand steady. "This document, his own writing, says our agreement was terminated. I am not his bride, nor his property. I am my own person, and what I choose now is truth." Owen jumped to his feet. "She's twisting words. You can't believe her." But Mrs. Patterson, the doctor's wife, stood up in the back. "I do believe her. I've seen this woman work, teach, and tend the sick. That's more Christian than abandoning someone in a blizzard." Then old Tom Garrett rose. "Eli Mercer's helped every man in this valley without asking a dime. You call that sin? Maybe you ought to look at your own soul first, Owen." More voices joined, not all, but enough. The tide turned right there in the little wooden church. Owen turned red, then white, then red again. He stormed out without another word. That night, in the quiet cabin, Eli brought out a small box. Inside lay a thin gold ring, worn smooth by time. "My mother's," he said. "Not asking you to wear it now, but I want you to have it, for when you're ready." Maggie looked at the ring shining in the lamplight. "It's beautiful." "It's simple," he said. "Sometimes those are the same thing." She whispered, setting it on the shelf beside her sewing basket. "When we're ready, we'll know." They never spoke the words again, but the knowing lived between them. Weeks passed, and the world began to thaw into spring. One bright morning, neighbors arrived for a small ceremony under the cottonwood tree by the creek. Reverend Cole stood Bible in hand, wind tugging at his coat. Maggie wore her mother's blue dress, mended but graceful. Eli had polished his boots and trimmed his beard. When the Reverend asked if they took each other in marriage, both voices answered steady and sure. The crowd cheered. Mrs. Patterson tossed wildflowers. Even the sheriff smiled. The celebration didn't last long. Before sunset, smoke rose from the hay barn, flames snapping high in the wind. Eli and the men ran for buckets, but the fire had eaten too deep. Maggie grabbed a shovel and dug a fire break with blistered hands. Neighbors came running. Together they saved the cabin, the fences, and the cattle. The barn burned to the ground, but the people stood shoulder to shoulder until the last ember died. When the sheriff caught Jake Coulter fleeing the scene, torch still in hand, everyone knew who'd sent him. Owen had tried one last act of spite. He arrived too late to see the fire die, sitting tall on his horse with false calm. "Shame about your barn, Mercer. Spring winds are dangerous things." Quote, Eli wiped sweat from his brow. "Funny, the wind didn't carry that torch you paid for." Owen smirked. "Careful what you accuse a man of." "I'm careful," Eli said, "but you should be more careful, Owen, because you just lost what little this valley still thought of you." Behind him, the neighbors stood watching, silent but solid as a wall. Owen saw it, the shift he couldn't undo. He turned his horse, fury hiding in his jaw. "This isn't over," he growled. "It is for me," Eli said, "because a man who burns barns to feel big already lost more than he knows." Owen rode off into the fading light, his shadow long and empty. When the last wagon left that night, Maggie and Eli stood side by side, looking at the ashes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "This happened because of me." "No," Eli said. "This happened because some men can't stand seeing others find peace. But we'll rebuild. We always do." And they did. That summer, the neighbors raised a new barn, stronger than the first. The Mercers, because that's what folks called them now, became the heart of Sweetwater Valley. Maggie taught the children in town, Eli worked the land, and together they built something better than either had known alone. 5 years later, two children's laughter echoed across the same porch where Maggie had once stood frozen and afraid. Emma with her mother's eyes, Thomas with his father's stubborn jaw. Sometimes at dusk, when the sun dipped behind the cottonwoods and the creek sang softly nearby, Eli would take Maggie's hand and look out over their land. "You ever wish things had gone different?" he'd ask. "Not once," she'd say. "Because every mile, every storm, every hurt led me here." He'd smile then, the quiet smile of a man who knew what true wealth looked like. Warm light in a cabin window, bread baking in the oven, and the woman who'd once knocked on his door in a blizzard now humming softly at his side. And when the wind came down from the mountains again, it no longer sounded angry. It sounded like memory, like gratitude, like home.